What is it about these two-dimensional games that's so haunting? What is it about these horizons that seem to stretch forever? Stretch far beyond what the developers had intended for us to play with. There's something so enticing and yet limiting to these two-dimensional planes we were expected to exist on. And it wasn't until the advent of the three-dimensional realm that we were allowed to move beyond, up and down, and left and right. Now we could move seemingly in any direction, although many boundaries did exist to keep us from wandering too far. However, that did not stop our imagination from wandering far beyond the boundaries of where the map or the level ended. And what is it that makes them feel so alive? They are just painted backgrounds, places we cannot reach and cannot touch, yet that does not stop our mind from wanting to. I began to retreat into computer games more and more, the backgrounds of these games becoming more and more tantalizing. I saw the boundaries of the television screen as some sort of frame for this painting, itself also bound to a type of agoraphobia, like older Gothic and Romantic paintings, asking us to perceive more than what is there. This can be seen as a type of fear, and at the null shore, this fear certainly takes shape. It's not a shoreline then, but a wound in the map, a place where the known slips into the unknown. The philosopher Edmund Burke described the sublime as a mixture of awe and terror in the face of vastness. The unreachable horizon becomes a symbol of the sublime in computer games, where agency is curtailed and the limits of the world are felt viscerally. The hero crosses a threshold into the unknown, and in video games, the null shore could represent that very threshold, a place where adventure ends, where no quest lies beyond. In an era increasingly defined by infinite scroll and endless content, the null shore is a rare encounter then, with digital finality. The concept of null shore then articulates a particular kind of boundary, not a solid wall, but a fading world. In mythic literature, shorelines often function as zones of transition. The banks of the river Styx, the beaches of Avalon, and the edge of the world in medieval maps. In modern contexts, computer games have taken over here, and the null shore can manifest in the invisible edges of designed space, where geometry dissolves, collision detection fails, and skyboxes flicker in early three-dimensional games. They are a hangover from the earlier two-dimensional sphere of places not meant to be visited, but only seen from afar. They thus represent a kind of mythos of the forbidden, the digital underworld beneath the game's coherent, surface-level narrative. To echo Victor Turner's work on liminality, these spaces are betwixt and between, neither here nor there. So what then do we make of Another World when viewed through this lens? The game offers zero freedom of movement, only left and right, occasionally up and down. You are bound to walk the same path over and over again, with the game leading you only where it wants you to go. None of the places in the background are ever reachable, and no matter how hard you try to do so, you can never alter the way the game looks as you're playing it. It is a bottled moment, a time-locked event that cannot be changed. And yet the game offers perhaps one of the greatest examples of an open world, a world of possibilities, a horizon that will be there long after we're all gone. Another World is a minimalist cinematic platformer that drops the player abruptly and without a clear enough explanation into an alien environment devoid of interface, narration, or familiar logic. Its sparse vector-style graphics and haunting ambient design means the game achieves something rare. It evokes the sublime and the liminal at the same time. It creates a world that feels suspended between dimensions, where every step is a crossing into another world. Our protagonist, Lester, is both an avatar for us and indeed his own character. If you created him from scratch on the select screen, it would have no bearing on his relationship with this world, for it is not his world, nor is it ours. It is very much a world you'd view through a set of binoculars. You can see it, and it's real, and it's close. but you can never interact with it. And when you do reach it eventually, it'll be different somehow, and the love that drew you to it will be replaced by a hollow feeling that it wasn't as good as it was when you first saw it. It is literally love at first sight. The worlds of another world, however, will always be as you see them, never being allowed to visit beyond the horizon. They will always maintain their beauty and wonder. It will always be love at first sight, and nostalgia will always be that trauma of never getting to visit beyond the world that we are bound to, both in our own 3D realm and in Lester's 2D world. And this is nowhere better encapsulated than in the elevator ride to the top of the tower, when we get a view of this strange world. The fact that it is locked behind a cutscene that lasts a few seconds hits home the idea that wonder and awe are fleeting. It is the moment at which we discover it for the first time that makes it special. It is also melancholic then, in its suddenness. We are only offered a window into this new life of his, and a window can only offer us what it encapsulates, the same way a frame imprisons a painting, for there exists nothing outside its edges, save for what we imagine ourselves. Despite being groundbreaking in its release, the game is dated by the hardware it uses, only allowing one screen, a frame, to be shown at one time. And each crossing of the threshold into the next screen produces a skip to the next part, almost like a kaleidoscope of pictures, Polaroids of someone's great adventure from long ago, divorced from context and meaning. It's almost a shame that the game does begin with a cutscene, and perhaps there is some improvement to be made by having the game simply start with Lester's entrance into the pool at the beginning of the game. Nothing in the game clues our hero into where he is, or indeed if he is a hero at all. All we know is that he simply must move on, pushing further and further into this new world. There is no preamble, no tutorial, no clear objective, and this beginning is quintessentially liminal. Lester is quite literally between worlds, flung from his sterile, earthbound laboratory into a place without names or markers. Indeed, his red sports car left behind becomes a symbol of human comfort lost, of identity lost, a severing from the ordinary and an entry into the unknown. And this unknown alien landscapes becomes Null Shore, a place of absence, of transition, of dislocation. The Sublime is also heavily seen in this game. In terms of scale, Lester often appears small in the frame, dwarfed by mountains, chasms, or alien architecture. It positions the player as fragile, overwhelmed by an environment that is not only foreign, but unfeeling. The silence is also felt too, in the absence of music for much the game allows for an ambient dread. When sound does occur, it's impactful and has weight. Death is also always near, and failure is frequent and brutal, and thus the Sublime arises not from realism, but from psychological scale, the feeling that the world is beyond understanding or control. And yet there can be beauty in the nothingness. The alien world is harsh, but it's also coherent. Its own logic is intact. And though the world is foreign, it is not entirely hostile. Indeed, an alien prisoner helps Lester escape captivity, and their relationship mirrors the Grand Tour, but in reverse. Traditionally, the Grand Tour was a rite of passage for wealthy Europeans traveling to Italy and Greece to absorb culture and aesthetics. Another world subverts this. Lester does not absorb any culture here. In fact, he survives it. And thus he learns not by observation, but by immersion and pain. And so the alien culture is not for his edification. In fact, it's quite indifferent to him. And it is here where we see moments not only of shared humanity, but shared sentience, as if the game is less about exploring an actual place than moving through mental states instead. Fear, wonder, hope, despair. Another world ends with Lester and his friend flying off on a strange organic glider, wounded but alive, towards some other unknown horizon. There is no resolution here, only release, no return to Earth, and so the game ends as it began, with ambiguity, somewhere on the threshold. Like many liminal works, it doesn't close the door behind the player, it leaves it ajar, asking them to sit with what they've seen. This idea, of course, resonates with the aesthetics of the Sublime, a concept rooted in 18th century philosophy, describing feelings of awe, of terror, of transcendence, provoked by vast or unknowable phenomena, filled with hazy horizons, unreachable zones, and spatial ambiguity. One of the earliest moments of liminality arose for me back in the mid-1990s, when I played Doom for the first time on the Super Nintendo. It was here that I first became aware of what lay beyond what was given to me. In this case, the mountains in the background here. I became fascinated by them. I knew I could never reach them, but I just wanted to zoom in a little bit closer, just a tiny bit, anything. All the times I tried to escape Croft Manor in Tomb Raider 2, the worlds I admired from a distance in those early games was really a stand-in for my own admiration of the distance beyond me in reality. One of my first encounters with what would become a massive part of my life began in 1995 with the game The Dig. It's a relatively simple sci-fi premise. A group of astronauts investigate an asteroid on a collision course with Earth. But what unfolds is not so much an action story, but a psychological and philosophical descent into the unknown. Many of the environments, the towering alien structures, the endless plateaus, the decaying technology, they evoke the romantic sublime. You are alone, surrounded by remnants of a vanished race. There were no crowds, no monsters, no armies, just echoes, and having a sense of being watched by the absence itself. Much like the Grand Tour, the protagonist's journey is one of forced reflection. The world does not respond quickly to your presence. Mechanisms must be deciphered, artifacts pieced together. There's no guidance but the world itself. As a result, exploration becomes reverent, ritualistic, asking the player to dwell in discomfort and piece together logic from runes. And so the sublime here is not found in danger, but in scale and silence. Every screen of this alien world dwarfs the player, reminding us that this journey is not one of conquest, but of confrontation with something larger than comprehension. And these disjointed worlds emphasize the space between, not seamless realism, but fragmented unreality. And Super Metroid is another great example we can use here. While it's more action-oriented than the other examples on this list, the world of Zebes is filled with deserted biomes, slow elevator transitions, and long stretches of emptiness. The Great Hollow in Dark Souls 1 is also another great example, a hidden and bizarrely vertical tree trunk leading to Ash Lake, which itself feels like a primordial edge of the world. It's almost unused, it's practically disconnected from the game's core progression. In Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9 in particular, the pre-rendered backdrops often imply spaces that cannot be entered, alleyways, doors, streets, other paths in the landscape. Because the player's movement is constrained by fixed paths in the game, the implied world feels larger than it actually is. Another great example of these liminal and null-shore places is the computer game Flashback from 1992. It's a cinematic platformer set in a dystopian future following our protagonist Conrad B. Hart, who wakes up with amnesia in a jungle on Titan. And through exploration, combat and puzzle solving, the player uncovers a conspiracy involving shape-shifting aliens and corporate mind control. Many of the environments in the game do echo this liminal mood. Indeed, the jungle on Titan, the opening area, it evokes a stranded feeling, a world just out of reach of meaning. Players wander through natural but artificial terrain, and there is a heightened sense of dislocation. For Conrad himself, this whole jungle, this awakening, functions as a waking liminal moment for him. the threshold between unconsciousness and identity. Indeed, the subtitle of the game is The Quest for Identity. In the levels of New Washington, these are transit hubs and city levels. They are areas full of subways, elevators, bureaucratic offices, and sterile corridors. These aren't homes or battlefields in the traditional place, but non-places, as theorized by Auge. New Washington feels both hyper-modern and uncannily hollow, a series of passageways for forgotten identities. These areas are alienating, symbolically empty, yet necessary for progression. It echoes the idea of the null shore, an in-between zone that must be crossed, even if it has no place in the world's geography. Flashback is also filled with moments of philosophical and spatial awe, and though the game is side-scrolling, the backgrounds are rich with scale. Planets, alien cities, corporate towers stretching upward or into darkness. The sense of depth and cold distance all enhances a feeling of cosmic insignificance, a hallmark of the sublime. And so Conrad's amnesia is much more than just a plot device. It is an existential void. And so as a player, you explore not only the game itself, but also the self. And this creates sublime introspection. Who am I if I'm not to be remembered? What is this world if its rules are hidden from me? And so memory here functions as a liminal function. The game begins with amnesia and it ends with ambiguity. Your quest for truth, for identity, crosses thresholds of selfhood, narrative, and world. Unlike modern instant respawn action games, Flashback's deliberate pace insists that transition is meaningful. Each traversal is a conscious act. It's almost ritualistic. The first Resident Evil game on the PlayStation 1 is also a great statement of liminality. In fact, the graphical limitations of the time, which turned every room in the mansion into its own confined and constricted area, makes the game deeply liminal. In fact, each door is a liminal portal. The camera cuts to a slow cinematic opening animation, creates suspense and a temporal pause between spaces. It increases the feeling that you are not just transitioning between rooms, but crossing psychological thresholds also. Much of the mansion does not even behave like real architecture. You solve what seem like ancient puzzles to move through bedrooms, insert crests into fireplaces, and drained fountains to access basements. These strange spatial logics create a cognitive dissonance. The space feels like a metaphorical dreamhouse where symbolic passage replaces functional layout. And so the Spencer mansion is not just large, it's impossibly layered. Secret underground labs, ancient catacombs, outdoor courtyards. The spatial illusion is one of a reality peeling back, all of which evokes the Gothic sublime, grand decaying structures echoing past decadence and concealed monstrosity. Even the encounters with the creatures of the mansion, zombies, hunters, and other mutated animals, they're not just threats but symbols of bodily horror. The way bodies rot, transform, or reanimate, it destabilizes the boundary between life and death, self and other, the ultimate liminal boundary. As the game uses pre-rendered backgrounds and fixed cameras to show players only partial perspectives, the fixed camera angles also become part of the psychological architecture. You never fully see what's around the corner. The sublime emerges from absence, as we have noted before. The mansion is ostensibly a home, but no one really lives there. Its function is confused. Bedrooms and dining halls exist beside crypts and labs. It is a lived-in void, a non-place. It's filled with signs of habitation, of course, but it's also devoid of people. It gives it a limbo-like quality, halfway between a real place and a theatrical stage. Scattered throughout the mansion are journals and letters from former researchers and residents. Many end abruptly or penned in despair. These documents haunt the space with suspended time. They are moments trapped in text where life ends mid thought. They are neither living nor dead, like much of the creatures in the mansion. Few games illustrate the concept of the null shore like Silent Hill. The town feels massive, but it's actually composed of compact grids. Roads abruptly terminate into fog. Buildings are locked or inaccessible. Interiors loop or duplicate. It all creates a psychological geography, one where meaning is fragmented, and the known world feels suspended over a void. The boundaries of the map are uncertain. When you walk towards the edge, the fog does not end, and so you are always approaching something you cannot reach. In GoldenEye, level boundaries are often invisible. And perhaps we all remember the first level on the dam, the strange horizon, the almost alluring, enticing nature of it. We also see the same level we are on, but in the distance, another area we cannot reach. In GoldenEye, level boundaries are often invisible. You reach the edge of the map and find a skybox, cliff, something that doesn't end but doesn't go anywhere either. Romantic painters, all of them specialized in vast, awe-inspiring landscapes that dwarfed the human subject. Crumbling ruins swallowed by nature, stormy skies or fading twilight, mountains, valleys, seas that evoked transcendence, loss, and the unknowable. And of course, among it all, the tiny, solitary human figures gazing at the scene, overwhelmed, those designed to amplify feeling, particularly longing, melancholy, and spiritual awe. The romantic landscape wasn't about what the world looked like, it was about what it felt like to confront a world that exceeded your comprehension. Developers' use of painted backgrounds, wraparound environments, all evoke that same tradition we see in the Romantic period. Its use here also to inspire awe and reflection. The painted backgrounds themselves become null shores in these games. These backgrounds often resist interactivity, makes them feel more like places you pass through rather than live in. They are liminal, static, full of mystery and transience. Just like a painting, you can't rotate the camera, change the angle. You can't touch or alter what is there. Like the player against these backgrounds, and you in an art gallery, your avatar is superimposed over a still world. In both states, you are like a ghost. And this disconnection evokes a spectator-like position, the wanderer above the sea of fog. Even when these games aged, their backgrounds did not, for they were already frozen in time. They became mental snapshots, burned into our memory, just like iconic romantic landscapes. And so the painterly stillness, once a limitation, now feels dreamlike, almost like an unreachable place you once inhabited. The worlds of Monkey Island, Broken Sword, and my personal favourite, Beneath a Steel Sky, are all fully functional, seemingly three-dimensional worlds, but they are not navigated in that sense. They are simply painted illustrations, in contrast to what I said earlier, creating a world of hyper-observation. And it features a city that is all liminality. Industrial ruins, abandoned elevators, shut down factories. Every background looks like the aftermath of a narrative, not the start of one. reinforcing a sense of solitude and alienation. Broken Sword, made by the same people, carries over this tradition. Empty cafes, sunlit cobblestone alleys, stone churches, the alleyway we climb up into the apartment from. And yet it evokes perfectly the core of the Null Shore, a world too large for its engine, filled in by imagination. Early three-dimensional games ask players to imagine what was beyond. The absence of detail becomes evocative. A hallway in Resident Evil and elsewhere holds more tension because you don't know what's behind that door. Not just narratively, but spatially. The windows in these games also become thresholds. It is there and yet it cannot be opened, interacted with, or exited or entered. It exists in the same sublime space as a mountain does in the distance in our real world. It's beautiful in its uselessness. What lies beyond the mountain does not yet exist yet in our mind, for we cannot see behind it. As in games, what is beyond the room hasn't been rendered. It might not even exist, and yet in your mind, it can. The Null Shore then could be seen as the endpoint of such wanderings. It is the digital ruin, the forgotten edge, the collapsed geometry, the place where the game's coherent world falls apart. It is also where the digital sublime manifests more powerfully, in silence, disorientation, and grandeur. It is a place without language, or without a known language. The digital code broken apart and incomplete, like some lost tablet or artifact, inscribed with remnants of a forgotten people, a forgotten purpose, lost runes on our landscape, divorced from the peoples and purposes they once had, canvases for which we can paint ourselves, fill in gaps the original designers and creators did not. These runes, both within and outside the world, in Dark Souls and elsewhere, are resonant because they resist interpretation. Lore and history lost to time, cobbled together through artifacts of which their provenance and truth are vague and haphazard. And on this shore, the player does not conquer or escape. They dwell, they observe, they change. These games remind us that space is emotion, that silence can indeed, paradoxically, speak, and that tension doesn't have to resolve. Like the backgrounds of old two-dimensional games, the backgrounds remain the same at the start as they did at the end, and yet something was still completed all the same. We had moved beyond something, even though the world beyond remained unchanged and indeed unmoved. If anything was moved, it was us.